let's explore histograms. Histograms are a great way to show the shape of the data that we're dealing with in our sample or our population. Our first step in constructing a histogram is to determine the number of classes. When I say classes, I'm talking about our columns or our rows in this illustration right here or in the histogram. We need to figure out how many of these do we need. So that's our first step. K is the smallest whole number where if we took 2 to that power, it is going to be equal to or greater than our n. Our sample size for this illustration will be 65. So if we took, let's just pick 6. If we took 2 to the 6th power, that's going to give us 64. 64 is not enough to include all of our n. So we're going to have to go one higher. 2 to the 7th power is going to be 128. 128 includes all of our sample size, so that's the one we're going to go with. Now that we know we'll need 7 classes for our sample size of 65, we now need to determine the class length or how long those classes are going to be. To do that, we're going to take our largest number minus our smallest number divided by our number of classes. In this case, our largest number is 29, our smallest number is 10, and our classes are 7. So 19 divided by 7 will give us 2.71. Because we're dealing with whole numbers, we're going to round that up to 3. Now that we know the number of classes and the length of those classes, our next step is to form those classes. We're going to start with the lowest number that we have. For our illustration, it's going to be 10. So we're going to start with 10. And we're going to include our class length, which is going to be 3. So we have 10, 11, and 12. So 10 through 12 is our first class. Our next class will start at 13. 13, 14, and 15. And our next class will start at 16. 16, 17, and 18. Now it's important to note that sometimes you'll see it illustrated as 10 and less than 13. That's okay because it's basically the same thing. 12 is less than 13. The important thing to note here is you don't want to count 13 twice. So it's not 10 through 13 because 13 starts your new class. Now here you'll see all of our classes. We have 7 clearly defined classes. Now you'll also notice that I'm not counting anything twice. So my first class here is between 10 and less than 13. So I'm going to count 12 up here, but I'm going to count 13 in this second class, and so on and so forth. Now once we have our classes formed, the next thing we're going to do is simply tally and count our data. Now we don't have room to list all of our data on here, so we're not going to illustrate that, but pretend like I'm counting here and I'm putting 1, 2, 3, 4, so forth. Since I don't have the data available to show you, I've put the numbers here in blue so we can practice drawing that histogram. We know we'll have 7 columns. 1, 2. Our first class is going to be 10 to 12, and our second class is going to be 13 to 15. Our third class is going to be 16 to 18, and so on. In our first column, we have about 3. In our second column, we have 14. In our third column, we have 23. In our next column, we have 12. In our next column, we have 8. In our next column, we have 4. And then we finally have 1. And then we have our histogram.